Hi, everybody. My name is David Nour, and I'm the co-host of the Sales Community Tech Sales Insight podcast and this live stream. We are live across LinkedIn and Facebook and YouTube. I want to welcome our audience as well. My co-host is the Sales Community founder and CEO, Randy Seidl. Hello, Randy.
Hey, Nour. How's it going?
Good. It's good to see you. We're also joined by an old friend of yours, Peter.
We are. Peter Quirk. Known him a long time. Somehow he's managed to keep his hair. Yeah. He's got a great background, which I'm sure you'll go through in case it doesn't come up. He actually ran the family tire business. So I don't know, any business probably it's harder than that. So tech really sales is easy compared to that. Great tech sales career. Runs global accounts for the East at HPE. Has great relationships. If I could be a rep, I would love to work for him.
That's awesome. Peter, welcome to our live stream.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to be here. So it should be fun.
Build on that introduction by Seidl, if you could, and give our audience, I know you did a little bit of it this morning on our podcast, but give our audience a little glimpse into Peter Quirk.
All right. So my career started back. If I look back, I started my career really at a software company called Computer Associates. I think Randy had actually gone off in a group of guys had all gone off to EMC. I went down the software road. From there, I worked at Sybase, also worked for a small software company called InterSystems in Cambridge. And then my wife got pregnant, was traveling, I was gone a ton. And then I made the decision that I just didn't want to be traveling all the time. So I went back and I ran a family commercial tire dealer, a retail tire dealer for 9 years. And a lot of lessons learned in that business, right? And then while I was in that business, I was watching these guys and folks that were during the dot-com time were killing it in tech. And I wanted to get back in tech. And so, I got out of the family business, still in the real estate portion of it, but out of the day-to-day, and I joined Legato Software. And I worked as a district manager at Legato Software. We got acquired by EMC, and I was at EMC for 3 years. Then I went to Commvault. And then I had coffee with Randy one day, and wouldn't you know, 6 months, I had a coffee with Randy one day, and he was talking to him about things we were doing at Legato. It was going great. We'd just gone public. Things were good. And then I left, and then I had a recruiter chasing me that day, sending me emails. I'm like, Randy, we do email archive systems. You can't be sending me recruiting stuff. And 6 months later, I joined HP, and I've been here now, HPE, for almost 10 and a half years. It's been amazing. It's been a good run.
Awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. What a great journey. Randy, let me ask you, do you see a lot of tech sales reps that maybe start somewhere else and they have some transferable skills to technology sales? And what would you say some of the highlights of those have been?
It actually doesn't happen that often. I've got some friends that are in kind of financial services that are early on to make the transition over. And I might be biased, but I think that for just sales in general, for technology sales, you really have to be on in all ways. And I think it's a lot more challenging than it is in other areas because you got usually it's very competitive. You got to have the technology differentiators. You got to know the organization. You got to sell value. You got to propose, close, but everything else. So you really have to be on in all ways. So I think unless you start in tech sales or do it early on, it's really hard to make a switch.
So Peter, let me ask you the same question. Are there some attributes, are there some behaviors that served you well in that family tire business that you were able to bring over to tech side?
Well, sure. I mean, I think anyone who's run their own business, and Randy's doing quite a few these days, right? And yourself, you're accountable to your own actions, right? So, we'd have a large, line of credit with the bank. We had to make our, payroll every single week. You took care of, all your HR issues. We had a manufacturing plant. We had trucks on the road. It just, what you took from it was the accountability that you have, whether as a rep in the field or as an owner of a business. You got to follow through and do what you say you're going to do, right? And you've got financial guidelines that you have to hit, right? You have timelines you need to hit. You have to manage your people, and you got the number one thing you have to do is you got to take care of your customer, right? So if sales are good and you take care of your customer, it fixes a lot of ills within the organization.
Just as a reminder for our audience, of course, I could keep asking these guys some great questions the next hour, but we also want you to jump in with questions of either Peter Quirk from HPE or Randy Seidl, and we'll make sure we include those. So, Peter, talk about that. Obviously, the title of our podcast this morning was really that personal accountability. And we want to talk a lot about both the art and the science of tech sales, reps, managers, leaders, really taking more of that personal accountability. Would you say that entrepreneurial environment is what really led the foundation of you doing more of that yourself?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, I grew up in a family business. My dad had 3 or 4 different businesses he was running at any one time. He had the core business, right? But was always doing things on the side, trying to figure out new ways of doing things. And one of the things that really attracted me to tech is the fact that it constantly changes, right? And with those changes that are taking place, it puts you in a position to, be trying new things, to be learning all the time, and it's opportunity, right? And when I looked at a group of people that were, I was seeing who were doing very well, I just thought to myself, hey, you know what? I could be doing that as well, right? I'm willing to take risks. I'll put myself out there. I'm willing to, try new things and be willing to fail and get up and try again. And more time than not, I've succeeded.
So, Seidl, let me ask you, personal accountability, where does it come from? Is it nature? Are people born that way? Is it nurture that's developed into them? And what are some of the traits you really appreciate when you see someone be accountable? How do they show up?
Yeah, I mean, everybody thinks, salespeople are born and you wing it, but Peter would probably agree. I mean, it's trained, it's nurtured, it's coached, it's developed. I'm still learning, learning all the time. And I think after the first week or month or quarter, anybody in sales learns accountability, starting when you're early on at SDR right out of college.
Peter, how about you? Is it nature? Are you born this way, or is it really developed?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? I mean, we had this conversation the other day in a call when, we're stack ranking the reps, which we still do, right? And, A, B, C players, we were having a discussion, can you take a C player and turn them into an A player? And my response back was no, you can't, right? Can you take a B or a B plus and get them up to an A minus? Yes, I think you can. I do think there are certain things that are innate in any career that you decide to choose, right? And you have to find where you fit in. What are your qualities? I mean, do you have good interpersonal skills? Do you have good oral skills and written skills, right? Do you present yourself well? Do you feel comfortable meeting people? I mean, those are kind of natural things I think you need to put yourself in a position to excel and grow in sales. If you're missing some of those basics, I think you're going to have a really hard time. Now, if you have those, all the things that Randy's talking about, can you take it and up it to the next level so you can become the AA plus player? I said, absolutely, you can.
One of my challenges, or one of the challenges that I see in organizations, is they tend to promote this. This particularly happens in sales, where you take really strong individual attributes and you just promote that person to a manager, a lot of times without the right training development to really be an effective sales manager.
Right.
Would your answers change in terms of attributes of accountable sales managers versus sales reps? And if so, how?
I mean, I think the question you're asking, can you take your top, best sales rep? Does that mean they're going to automatically be a good manager? Is that what you're asking?
And what are the attributes of accountability of a sales manager that may differ from one of a sales rep?
Well, as a sales rep, number one, you worry about yourself, right? I mean, your view into the business, you really have to take care of yourself. Ultimately, you're taking care of the customer initially, but you really have to worry about your image and about how you represent yourself from the customer back to the customer. As a manager, what you're really trying to do is promote yourself out through your people, right? Because a manager's job really is to remove obstacles for them to sell. So you have to be a bit more conciliatory, I think, and you have to be a bit more of a psychologist dealing with a lot of different personalities because you want a diverse team, right? You want some people, and we had talked about this, I think, in the podcast we did. Some folks are great at doing the forecasts. They nail their numbers all the time, but they can't get their expenses in, right? Someone in ops and finance will get totally ticked off that this is happening. But as a manager, you may go, hey, I don't care that person can't do their forecast. They're really good at creating and curating net new deals, and I'm going to help them through that process. But I'll take sure we'll have someone who will help them get that done. Or you have someone else who might not be good at closing, So you're like, hey, great, bring the deal to the end. I'll help you close the deal and get it done. So as a manager, I think you have to be very receptive and understanding of the different types of people you're dealing with, and what are you doing to help them improve themselves, and how do you manage those different personalities, because you don't want everybody to be the same. And as a rep, you just have more things to worry about, I think, as a manager and as a rep. And a lot of the things that you do as a good rep, you will use as a manager, right? But there's some folks that have a hard time making that jump.
Randy, I think we've got a question from Jesse.
We do. And again, as a reminder, feel free to ask any questions in the chat. Hopefully everybody sees that. So Jesse asks, what are some of the ways you can develop internal relationships better to develop a longer tenure at your company? Then he also says, I've struggled to maintain jobs. That could be a different issue.
So you want me to answer? I'll answer that, Randy. So
sure,
it's interesting. I had a person that had worked for me at another company made a comment later on in my career, and they said, hey, Peter, you're really good at selling up. And I thought, I kind of took that as an insult in some ways, a little bit, right? Because selling up implies that you're really taking care of yourself and you're fooling people above you, right?
Managing up sometimes.
You're managing up, right? But and I've learned that in a really big company. In a small company, you don't necessarily worry about that as much. But in a big company, how you're perceived at the top really enables you to do more or less. If you have a really good perception, when you come with a problem or you need help, if the perception's good of you, you'll more than likely get it done. If not, it could get pushed off. So it's important to not only manage from below, but to manage up as well. And can you put the question back up? I want to make sure I answer.
Sure. And it's all about, really
internal relationships.
So my point being is that you develop those relationships down below, but you also need to, in a management position, develop the relationships up above. And you have to spend time on both of them. And you got to be careful. My view has been, you really need to take care of everybody and treat everybody the same throughout, the entire hierarchy within the organization, because you never know who you're going to need to help you out. Because you see some people that blow through people and then eventually it bites them, right? So those relationships you maintain down below, work on the ones up above, and work on them. Stay in touch, send emails. Randy's just follow what Randy does. He's a professional at it. Right?
I was going to ask, Randy, do you want to build on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I have a funny, sort of funny story. So back when I was at EMC, I ran the inside sales program. I'll date myself, 1985. And Dick Egan, who was the CEO and founder, his wife, Maureen, was at the front desk. So what I would judge candidates by always was, hey, Maureen, how were they to you? Were they standoffish? Were they nice? Because however they're going to treat her as a receptionist, they didn't know it's she's a huge owner of the company, but however they treat her is really kind of what their personality is. So to Peter's point, not just up, but kind of just everybody around you is just the right thing to do and how you want to conduct yourself.
If I can just jump in with just a comment, I've always believed in every interaction, this might be useful to Jesse. In every interaction, you have two opportunities when it comes to your relationships. You're either going to enhance your credibility and repute, or you're going to dilute it.
Right.
The choice is yours based on the value that you add, the commitments that you make, and follow through, which is a process, not just follow up, which is the transaction. So if you focus on those things, how am I adding value? How do I make sure I commit to less, but commit to the things I can in fact get done, and then follow through to make sure they get done? Those are the ways that I've learned to build long-term relationships over some time. Randy, we've got another one from Philip.
Yeah, Phil, great to hear from you. Peter, you've been a great example of owning what you can own, but remaining calm, collected, and effective in incredibly stressful end of years, end of quarters, et cetera. What are some of the keys here to remain calm?
Phil, it's funny. That's a great question. I was talking to someone who recently left about that. The way I've always done it, I find when things get really complex and difficult, somehow I get calmer. I kind of slow down, right? Even when the world's falling apart, because I've just learned, not just about when we're closing deals or at the end of a quarter, but when a customer has a major issue, and we run into issue, we've all had customer have problems. I've learned that over time, we're going to find a solution. I've always believed I'm going to find a way to get there. And then as we get near the end of the quarters and you got big numbers, there's so many things you just don't control, because when you get to the end and you're doing your forecasting, that's where the art comes in, right? What's really going to nail? And our job is to forecast revenue when it's going to come in. I would just justify it in my own mind. I am doing everything I believe I can do. Like, I wake up every day, I look in the mirror and I go, hey, I'm going to be better than the competition, right? And I'm going to work my tail off. I'm going to show up and I'm going to apply myself. And if I fail, I fail. Right. And I just justify it in my mind. Majority of the time I feel pretty good about it. There's those days I struggle and I have a hard time with it. But the majority of the time I get up and say, hey, if I fail, I fail. Then this isn't for me. Right. And so far I've done pretty well most of the time.
So, Randy, I want to build on that. So I'm really curious about Phil's comment about there's some leaders that are just the duck, right? Above water. They're Peter Quirk, right? Calm, collected. Nothing seems to bother them. Under the water, there might be a whole lot of hustle going on. Where does that come from? How do you, is that, again, something you develop in a manager or a leader? Is that calm, collected kind of demeanor?
Yeah, I think it's called maturity. I mean, I don't know, Peter in the early days, but I mean, we all have our, times where you learn. And, again, the best thing I could say is, treat others like you want to be treated. So I think we all had managers where we were kind of treated in a certain way. Then, we may look in the mirror and say, well, geez, do I really want to treat my people or my team like that? And that's how you kind of throttle yourself accordingly.
That sounds great. We've got another
It's funny, hey, David, that question coming from Phil, because Phil's the exact same way. He's cool, calm, collected. And I've seen him in some pretty tough situations that he's worked through well. I think some of it also goes back to even playing team sports, or just when you're down and out and you think you can't make it and somehow you pull it off and you do. I mean, that's the way sales is in many ways. You just got to stay focused on the goal and you can make it happen. Just keep believing. It's amazing as a leader. You keep saying it and keep working it. And then all of a sudden it starts to happen. Sometimes you go, wow, I actually did it. It makes you feel good. Right.
That's awesome. So, Randy, we got a question from Bill.
Yes. Yep. I think the first part you already covered, Peter, which is how do you manage your relationships inside of HPE? But I think a great one is how do you manage your relationships outside of the company?
That's something I do need to work on more so, right, over time, because you get kind of myopic. One of the things you struggle with is you don't want to be too internally focused, right? Because you just get wrapped up in the day to day, and things like we're doing here with the sales community, looking at your LinkedIn, and really reading up what some other people are doing, commenting on it has been helpful. Getting involved with your local school system. My wife's actually a principal in elementary school. We volunteer, and there are things that we do there that help. There are clubs and organizations that we get involved with. There's the network that you build outside is as important, if not more important, to yourself. So you do have to work on it. And it's something with COVID, David, that I've worked on. We talked about this with me not traveling as much as I used to. I find myself, I have time to really focus and build plans. And one of the plans I've been working on is how do I do a better job networking? And Randy actually has been very helpful to me on that as well.
For our audience, one of the things that I did, again, right as the pandemic was hitting, and I've coached others to think about, is what if you made a list of your top 100 most valuable relationships? Yeah. And you proactively, inside, outside the organization, you proactively touch base. Again, Randy Seidl does this kind of in his DNA naturally, but most people don't. They get a very myopic of, here's the 20 people on my pipeline, or here's the 10 people in my company that I need to touch base with, or here's only my best customers. And they get blind spots on others that could be really, really useful and impactful to you.
It's an easy trap to fall into. You just get busy, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Nour's written books on this. So I think your first was a relationship economics. So he has several PhDs in effect in the topic. But a couple little snippets. I've learned a lot doing a sales community during COVID, and one of which is going to kind of sound a little ridiculous, but kind of leveraging LinkedIn. So put in some plugs there. But I probably during April reached out to a lot of CIOs and CTOs that I know I'd met with before, and I saw they're never going to remember me. And it was amazing the number of responses that I got that were kind of very thoughtful. So I could kind of leverage that from a relationship perspective. And then also, I don't know if people are familiar with Sales Navigator, but you can kind of tag kind of whoever you want. So a specific example for me, for sales community, the 230 or 40 that are on my advisory board, I have them tagged so I can go into my sales navigator and then I could see kind of what are they posting. Because if you just go into the regular kind of LinkedIn feed, you get, lost with, it's just impossible to catch up. But it's, specific, people that I want to make sure I keep track of. So similarly, those that are in sales, you can go in and tag companies that you're selling to, people you're partnering with, specific, end user customers that you want to target with. And that's a great way to, nurture relationships real time.
So talking about accountability, Matt has a great question. So Randy, next one, Matt Gruen.
Yes. Here we go. And this thing is changing. Let's see here. Where we go, Matt. All right. Peter, you and your team work with the largest customers in the world. What expectations do you have of team members understanding the entire portfolio that HPE offers versus knowing in depth the customers? The answer is probably both, but.
It is. You just answered it. Yeah, it is definitely both. Matter of fact, I was doing a review this morning with one of the large financial institutions, right? And the global account manager that's managing that account has been on relatively new, really about a year and a half, but has really started to hit his stride on building and understanding. He's built the relationships. Now he truly understands what the customer's trying to get done, and we're becoming a good, solid advisor for them, right? Now, what we also do, just a little blocking and tackling, is you still got to break it down by all the individual products and services that we have. And I went through it with him, and I find it excruciating actually to do it because I much prefer doing the higher level relationship type things. But you still have to do the nitty gritty grind of the work, which is, hey, we're here to sell products and services, and we're here to help our customers. And you got to go through by product line and by BU and then by product and then build it back into what the customer is trying to achieve, right? So you're still doing the basics, managing the relationship at top, and then he puts together a plan, and then he implements it.
Seidl, I remember your famous saying at HPE, which was Cios, sell everything on the truck.
The truck, yeah.
Right?
There you go.
So talk about that. What did you do to drive that the portfolio awareness and understanding that Peter brought up, and then aligning kind of the expectation you had of your team with what the customers needed?
Yeah, so I have to give credit where it's due. Rich Napolitano, back in the days at Sun Microsystem, actually came up with it, and I just leveraged it, and I'm probably better known for it. But it's a basic concept, right? Which is, okay, you have a lot of things you want to kind of cross-sell, upsell across the portfolio. So how do you make sure that you kind of keep everybody accountable for kind of selling all those? So it's a lot of different things, but one in particular I mentioned. So as you do kind of quarterly business reviews or account reviews, you might have 8 or 10 kind of different things. So you line up the account and you say, okay, here's the different either product lines or solution sets or area of focus or cloud solutions or services, whatever it is that we want to sell. And, what are we doing to sell to specific account each one of those areas? And in doing it, another thing I'd add on to Peter's last answer too is, leveraging partners. So in the technology space, there's all different shapes and sizes of partners that can really help be your feet on the street, to know their product set, to know their offering, to know the customer as well. That's a great way to leverage yourself in the accounts.
So guys, it's time for some coaching and mentoring, because we've got a question from Ashley.
There you go. What's the fastest way to become a sales manager? I'm sick of my current role as an SDR.
All right, Peter, put on your coach.
Well, first thing that came to my mind is, how long have you been an SDR? Because remember, we talked a little bit about patience before, right?
Yeah.
And I have a daughter that is an SDR, right? And actually was recently promoted from being an SDR to a field rep. So then it took her about 2.5 years for that to happen. So how do I become a sales manager? Well, first, you're probably going to go from an SDR to a field salesperson, depending upon what the organization's like. Mm-hmm. And then as a field salesperson, there's probably going to be different levels, right? Again, it depends the type of organization that you're in. But you're going from inside sales to outside sales. When I started my career, we started as an inside salesperson, very short time frame. Then we went out into outside sales, and then from there, I ended up as an account manager. I had half the territory, but I was assigned to a senior account manager who carried my territory as well. And then I became a full account manager. And then, so you got to understand the progression. And then once you start having some success and if the company's growing and the need for managers are there, you show your ability to manage a lot, a portfolio, your account base, you interact well and you manage people well, those relationships internally, and then you will become potentially available for a role. The one thing you do have to do is when you're doing your career planning and you're talking to your manager, you want to tell your manager, that's what I want to do, right? And then have your manager hopefully lay it out for you. What's the time frame? And, realistically, here are the things you need to do to reach those goals.
So, Randy, Peter and I met like 10 years ago at I think HPE. He's definitely one of the more patient leaders. And do you see a lot of talented sales reps and managers? Is it advantageous to jump ship to another account, or you're better off staying somewhere and growing your name and brand and moving up the ranks that way?
Yeah. So although I have a recruiting business, I'd say my typical answer when most people call is the grass is not always greener. They come with a kind of laundry list is why I don't like this, and I say, well, okay, let's start each one, and you can come up with some ways to address each one of the issues. And I think too often in your what's more important than your career, family, God, whatever. But too many times people are too quick versus, hey, let's try and fix where you're at. Before you jump ship. And then a couple of things I'd add on for Ashley's benefit is, even though you're an individual contributor, if you're an SDR for, kind of 3 months out of college, there's still things, it may be 2 years till you're going to become a manager, but there's things you can do like mentoring, other people that are, coming in, the next, kind of new hire class, sharing best practices or things that you're doing that you could share with others. I mentor somebody, Kelly Singh Sang, who's at salesforce.com in London. And we're talking yesterday. And I said, hey, one of the things you can do is, we're talking about mentoring. And I said, do they have a library of kind of what you should do for mentoring? She said, well, I don't know. We'll go look. And if it's weak or they don't have one, then create one. Right. So that's kind of out of the scope of exactly what her job is. But again, it just shows a propensity to Peter's words before, really want to help others do well. And those are good aptitudes to be a manager.
Great segue to our next question by Anu.
Yeah, Anu, thank you. Sales team I once inherited was fantastic at winning new business, but did not do an effective job of ensuring client satisfaction. Any suggestions on how to deal with this challenge?
Peter, I'm going to ask you.
So did not do an effective job. Just reading it again. It's trying client satisfaction.
At quick glance, I guess I would say is, selfishly, if they're not happy, you're not going to sell more. So a lot of times your reps may want to just kind of, churn and burn, or they may think that they're going to be losing the territory, but the reps really need to be that, one-stop shop, I think, into the customer from a satisfaction perspective. Also kind of different than, 10, 20 years ago, there are, kind of customer satisfaction, groups within companies that, also could be leveraged. So Peter, any other thoughts that you have?
Oh yeah, but what I was thinking is, it goes back to that point, David, where when I said as a manager, you want to build a diverse team. So if everybody on the team is a hunter and everyone's out there finding new deals and just turn and burn, as Randy talked about, you're not going to have folks that are going to be there for the longer term. Like they're hitting deals, then they're moving on because it's going to be another year or two before another big one hits. So if you have a diverse group of folks, some folks are better off as account managers. They're better off managing business, right? You could have we used to have a CSR rep when I was at Legato Software. We had, customer service rep. So the rep would go get it, and then we'd hand it off to a CSR who would manage it internally, and the rep would touch every once in a while. And once that account got hot again, would jump back in. So it all depends upon the size of the business. But the answer really is you need a diverse group of people.
Seidl, you and I know a lot of, I'm sure Peter does as well. We know a lot of sales executives within SaaS companies in that recurring revenue annual subscription business model. Do you believe that client satisfaction and making sure that you re-earn, because they can cancel, right? So, re-earning instead of a transactional software license deal, re-earning that annual revenue is going to heighten the need for satisfaction?
Yeah, Definitely. I mean, it's a cash cow, almost like the insurance business, which sounds great, but the point that things are not going great, it can be awful, and Wall Street can totally crush you. And you inherit that stream, but most on the sales side are really judged on that kind of net new. So you're not going to sell net new if they're kind of pulling back.
Well, yeah, and if you look at the valuations of SaaS companies, there's key things they value on, right? So what's the customer acquisition cost? Because we all know it's really expensive to acquire a company, right? It's pretty easy to lose, acquire a customer, excuse me. It's pretty easy to lose them. And when you lose them, it's tough to get back. And all these SaaS companies are being measured on what's their customer retention rate, right? And you let that metric drop, the valuations of these companies drop pretty rapidly. So it's super important that you have a model where you keep them happy and figure out how to sell them net new services, right?
Do either one of you like sales reps to be responsible for that retention, or do you like the idea of passing the baton to a customer success, some sort of a concierge desk that nurtures and is really focused on retention?
So it depends. I went from smaller startup companies, right? I was 3 companies that had gone public prior, and I ended up going to the behemoth, right, which was HPE at the time. They had all those resources, right? So if you're a small company, you may not have those resources, right? And it depends how quickly you're acquiring. Are they new customers we're acquiring all the time? I don't think it's an easy answer to give. It all depends upon the organization. I don't know, Randy, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm old school, so I always love holding the reps, accountable and responsible, so they can leverage other resources. But they need to have those relationships, and reps may not like the call, midnight on a Friday or Saturday night, which we've gotten as executives. But such is life, right? That's the gig we signed up for.
Right.
So we have our next question from Chris.
Chris, yes.
What
do you think is the most valuable attribute for a sales leader? And what do you think is the best way to find people with these attributes while recruiting? And then it also says within younger gens, and I'd also say especially the importance now with diversity.
I think with that, so number one, I think would be accountability, right? So as a manager and as a sales leader, you're accountable. We're accountable to delivering the revenue, forecast what the revenue is going to be. The other one is honesty, right? You need people that are principled, right? You got to make sure that to the right are right, because you don't want to get into problems, right? And you want, because you talk about honesty and accountability, and from there you can really start to build a relationship with the person. You can trust them, and over time they're going to deliver for you. I mean, when I meet with people, I try to get a pretty good understanding of what their background is, just a general sense of what kind of person they are. Are they inquisitive, right? Are they always trying to learn new things? Are they a lifelong learner? How do they treat people? Give me an example of, a tough deal or tough customer you dealt with, what took place, what their style is. And again, trying to see, one of the most important things we do when we hiring as a manager is probably the most important thing we do. Because if I hire a really good manager, it makes my life so much easier. But is there a cultural fit with that person within our organization for the position that we're looking for? Because if you get that good cultural fit, everything else I think will fit in.
Yeah, and I just one thing I'd add on there is I think reference checking, but kind of I'd say a diverse reference checking. So, people of different backgrounds that well, hopefully firsthand, what do they say about that person? And it's any companies where I've been, you promote somebody, people tell you, hey, it's great, it was a long time coming. You kind of put somebody in a plan, or you fire somebody and they say, hey, that's great, it's been a long time coming. So typically, people that are surrounding that person know really the situation. So that's another good data point.
So Peter, one of the questions I asked you in our podcast interview this morning was, we're talking about Dan Bellinger and leaders or managers in your past
that
have had a real profound impact on not just your performance, but really the manager, the leader that you've become. Can you comment on some of those attributes? What have others shared with you, maybe top 2 or 3 that have really shaped you as a leader?
So, I worked for Dan for 10 years, right? And, as a leader, again, for him, accountability was huge. Taking responsibility for when you succeed and for when you fail. The other thing that he did, almost to a fault at times, we talked a little bit about this, is Dan was extremely loyal. It still is, I think, to this day, right? And that in a large organization, when the problems found their way up to the top, it was never him pointing fingers at somebody else. Never. It was, hey, I own it. What are we going to do to try to figure out? So loyalty, accountability were things that were really important. The ability to admit when you made a mistake and try and go off and fix it. We also talked about when, for me, some of the things that have been really helpful and why I've ended up staying at HPE for so long was the exposure that I got as I moved up in the organization to our senior leadership, right? And we talked about the years that I worked very closely with Meg Whitman and her team through Dan, right? Both Dan and I were growing within the organization. We had more and more responsibility. And for her, she had a saying, run to the fire. So when there's a problem, run to the fire, don't run from it, because problems don't get better with time, right? And if there's a problem, and if you're in a sales, leadership role, or if you're a rep in the field and you're having a difficult quarter, go to your manager, right? Let he or she know what's going on so you can address the problem. If you ignore it, it's only going to fester and it's going to get worse. And then the other thing was escalate early, escalate often, right? Fix, I think it was escalate within 24, fix within 48. So the sense of urgency, right? Everything has to have a sense of urgency. That was one thing I learned at EMC that they're known for, and Randy talked about Dick Egan, is that their ability to execute is just like, if you're going to go do something, they want it done now, right? Inertia just kills a lot of companies, right? So Meg was trying to do that, but it was a 400,000 employee company across 184 different countries. Is a different task, right? But you try to build that in. So those are, I think, some of the key things I've learned.
Randy, I'm not sure I've ever, as long as I've known you, I've asked you the same question. So what have been the biggest advice you've gotten from past managers, past leaders? Think of maybe 2 or 3 that have had a profound impact on you as a sales executive, as a leader.
Yeah, so I'd say under Donatelli and Hurd, rest his soul, where kind of know your business, know the details on the business. At the EMC between Dick, Roger, and Jack was really all about focus on the customer, make your number, do all the details well. So those are a couple things in particular.
Did you have Bill Campbell? Wasn't it? Didn't you work with Bill Campbell, if I remember?
Yeah, Nour's probably wants me to give shorter answers, but so Silicon Valley guru Bill Campbell was fortunate enough to mentor under him. Peter Bell, likewise was very, very close to him, but just kind of was, there's a great book, $1 Trillion Coach, but just really is all about being, authentic. And I think the higher you go in organizations, so to me, it's easier to sell to CIOs and CXOs and CEOs than it is the middle management people, because the people that are getting promoted are the ones that are authentic. They are real. They don't throw people under the bus, treat people how they want to be treated. So Nour, sorry, I was going to point out before we move on. So Jim Beard brought up a couple or some good points around customer satisfaction. So thanks, Jim. Says the company, some of the reasons are typically, number 1, the customer isn't delivering. Number 2, the customer has unrealistic expectations. Number 3, the salesperson did a poor job of managing expectations or overpromised. And his opinion is half the time the salesperson, in an effort to close the sale, promised things that couldn't be delivered or was obscure about what the company could deliver. I'd say that's probably generally correct. So thanks for that, Jim.
So we've got another. I want you to know, Ashley Smith is getting some ridiculously valuable coaching and mentoring in this session, right? This is what sales community is all about. Right. So here's her next question.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're happy, reps and SDRs, so, we have the whole kind of spectrum with sales community, individual contributors on up to CROs and CEOs. So the idea is we want to serve those that are kind of in the sales realm. So any questions are always very, very wanted. Anyway, I might miss my quota this quarter and I'm worried about getting fired. Where should I go to get extra help when my company won't provide it? I'm gonna chime in because it's something I'm passionate about. Yeah. From so the quota, and a lot of people disagree with me, but for a stack ranking, Ashley could be doing everything right, but just kind of has a tough territory, maybe some bad breaks on some deals. And then but the behaviors are all great. And then you could have somebody else who kind of just got a bluebird deal, as an example, is going to crush the number, but the behaviors are all wrong. So I always say, when I evaluate, sales talent, it's not just the number. Number certainly over time is a big indicator, but I think it's the objective measurements of not just the number, but kind of likewise how all the behaviors are. And I'd much rather somebody that's doing all the right behaviors and maybe just got a couple bad breaks, as opposed to somebody who's got bad behaviors and happen to get lucky.
So, Randy, to answer her question directly, that's what the manager should do, right? What you just said is what the manager should do. For her concern is, you got to go to your manager and ask, what do I need to do, right? What am I doing that's not working? And build a plan to address the issue. It could be the quotas are too high, to Randy's point, right? It could be that you're just not going after the business the right way. Or it may even turn out that maybe sales isn't the right place for you now, meaning take this the right way. Because the idea about a company and as a manager is to find the right place for you within the business. That doesn't mean you're not valuable, right? Maybe there's another role that's available. But I would start with your manager. The manager can certainly help you.
Peter, I want to build on that. So I don't know Ashley, I don't know her scenario, but let's just say a sales rep is not getting the support that he or she needs from their immediate manager. What do you recommend then? How do I like the company, I like the product, but I'm struggling and I'm not getting the attention to help. And it's not, bad intentions. This pandemic isn't helping, but I'm not getting the support. What do you suggest?
So we've all had managers that she could potentially go to her manager and it's not going to get what she needs, right? So it's who else within the organization. Could be another manager, it could be someone within the finance department or operations, or in engineering. Again, marketing, depends how big the organization is. That could help you, because there's other stakeholders within the business that want to see you succeed, not just your manager. And that's a bit of an art. You got to be careful how you approach it, because again, how hierarchical is it? You have to make that decision. But also outside of the business, the partners that you work with, right, could be the resellers that you work with. Many times, at HPE, for example, close to 75% of our business goes through value-added resellers. They can be extremely helpful to help you understand some of the issues you might be dealing with. And it's suppliers as well. Again, it depends upon whether you're selling software or hardware, but look to broaden your ecosystem outside, or also other reps can help you as well, because you can build an internal team. You know who to trust and who you can go to. Just keep expanding who you know and talk to.
Great idea. Randy, we've got a question from Bob DiCarlo.
Yes, thanks, Bob. Great discussion, David, Randy, and Peter. Peter, as a top leader at HPE, can you share your skills and practices to anchor your life in purpose while your customer team and personal expectations?
So, Bob, I think you're saying, how do you balance? Is it a work-life balance, Randy? Is that how you read that?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I'm going to answer on your behalf. Then you could disagree if you want. But I think, Peter, I think we're both men of faith, and family likewise is very important. So I think you wake up every day. There's other things more important than work, and that's how he kind of leads his life. But Peter, I'll let you take a stab at it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a balance. Randy went off. He was saying, was it God country? It was family, God country, right? I think it was whatever it was, whatever the Marines would do. But most importantly, it is, you got to have a good, solid work-life balance. You got to get up every day and feel good about what you're doing. You got to feel good about the company you're working for and the team and people that you're working with. And Bob, the team that we have at HPE, we spent a lot of time trying to, as a company, work to expand and make it a nice place for people to work so they can reach their goals, right? So it's a balance.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing overall is just trust, right? So whether it's you to somebody on your team, somebody that's above you, trust is such a huge factor.
So we've got a question from Mark.
Yes, Mark. Where is Mark? Mark Beavis. Thank you. Peter, has the pandemic driven any changes in the way in which you lead? Are there areas you will keep as part of your leadership style once we start to get back into the field?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I do a lot more one-on-ones now. I mean, I do a lot more calls, and I schedule them on a regular basis, and force myself to do it. Whereas before, I would meet people in the field one-on-one. Take Mark, for example. Mark is based in London. I can't wait to get back over to Canary Wharf and see our customers. We were doing a call today, and I'm getting tired of doing Zooms, right? So I think what will change is the balance will be, I won't be traveling as much, but I will certainly get back out and see people one-on-one. That's what I'm looking forward to getting to.
Randy, let me ask you the same question. What do you believe are some of the leadership attributes that will carry over in the after pandemic world, and what do you think are some that we may leave behind?
Yes, I think, and I've learned a lot during the whole pandemic time, just in terms of automation. I mentioned LinkedIn. There's a whole boatload of marketing technology tools. Being able to leverage LinkedIn. Actually doing the Zooms. I would have never done them before, and there's a lot to be said for just ability to be productive. So on the one hand, COVID's been unfortunate for sure, but you're able just to get so much more done. And allows you to, I think, going forward, the thing I'll take out of it is to be a lot more selective around how you kind of what you do with your time. So, there's a lot of things where, hey, you can now just do a Zoom. You don't have to go meet somebody for a coffee or, the time it takes to drive or Uber. So I think you'll be able to be, much more efficient and productive going forward, being selective. And the trick is you got to, know when to say either no or no, I'm not going to meet face to face, but hey, let's do a Zoom instead. So you still get the interaction without having to, burn as much time.
See, David, what I think is going to happen, Randy's absolutely right, spot on, but I still think you're going to be doing both. Right? I think you're just going to be doing more.
Yeah.
You're going to be doing more, right?
So Randy, I want to know more about Randy's famous advice was more sales calls. Has that been always part of your DNA to just make more sales calls?
So a lot of ways to answer the question, but kind of true story. When I went to HP, culturally, we needed to do a lot. We needed to upgrade the people, the culture, lots of fantastic people. Pre-sales, especially, it was super strong. But at the end of the day, I had kind of many lists of a lot of different things. But I just tried to kind of dumb it down and say, if there's one thing we could do well, is more sales calls. So I'll say maybe before I got there, we were kind of maybe on average 5 or 6 sales calls a day. So it's to say, hey, if we could do 8 to 10 sales calls, a week. I wish it was 5 a day. So five a week. We can go from 5 a week to 10 a week. And if I could lead by example, and my direct reports would lead by example, which would have never been done before, then if you're an individual contributor, you should be able to do it. So theoretically, if you could increase that activity of that, kind of face-to-face behavior, then pipeline and sales and everything else would improve. And we used to do chants and had a lot of fun with it.
So Peter, let me ask you that mindset in this pandemic. Is this just about creating same thing, more calls and more Zoom meetings and more ways to engage a broad audience?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a change. It's been a cultural change for a lot of folks, especially direct salespeople, right? That have one account, right, and that are used to being at that account on a regular basis. And now what they're doing is they're doing, Zoom calls, doing calls like we're doing right now. The thing that has helped is the customers are in the same boat, right? And so is the competitors. So yes, I mean, we're doing more of this. You're still doing the same activities you were doing before, but you're not doing them in person. And I think we're getting better at using these tools, right? I think we're all feeling more comfortable doing video calls. And our customers are as well. And it's just more acceptable, whereas before, a lot of times it just wasn't acceptable, whereas today it is. So to answer your question, yes.
All right. So Randy, we got a question from Joe.
Yes. Thanks, Joe. With a broad range of customers and portfolio, what are some of your best practices and/or what tools do you leverage in order to keep you organized and focused on moving the sales forward?
Okay. Well, there's let's take two main things. So number one, and this was actually started, I think, Randy, when you were here, along with Rich Girafo, right, as a name from the past, the account business planning session, right, the business value framework. We still do massive reviews, ABPs we call them, and we build out the plan, right? And then we execute the plan. And then from a day-to-day tracking point of view, we use Salesforce extensively, right? Our inside sales folks are using LinkedIn, they're using Sales Navigator or Zoom Info, right? I think it was acquired, right? So those tools, those are the main tools that we're currently using.
Randy, let me ask you the same. Are there some, you and I think talked about how RevOps has taken off in a big way. Are there some either interesting tools or technologies you're hearing about that are moving opportunities along?
Yeah, definitely. Let's see, one in particular, Captivate IQ. It's a, one of the big hassles that sales teams have is, tracking the commissions and knowing when they're going to get paid, how they're going to get paid. It's a SaaS platform. Another one would be Dooley, which is a really cool tool helping on the AI side for sales reps. I talked to one yesterday, Cxos. They're in the ABM space, SalesLoft, and LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is kind of the bread and butter for sure, and it's very cool. We can do this on LinkedIn Live, especially.
So let's go to a question by Mark Platt.
Thanks, Mark. I believe in sheltering blame and sharing credit. How do you manage that up so your leadership doesn't always think that I am to blame?
That's funny. Well, if you're the leader and the people are under you and they're making a lot of problems, I think you are to blame, right? I think you need to work closely with them so the mistakes are few, right? And you manage through it, right? It's kind of a blunt answer, but you might have to make a change with some of the folks in your team, right? If you give them an opportunity to make a mistake, but if they continue to make the same mistake, you got to move them out.
Seidl, I'm going to ask you the same question. How do you deal with setbacks? How do you deal with things that don't go well? And then how do you bolster and how do you celebrate great wins?
Yeah, I think similar to what Peter had said, I think in the podcast, but it's kind of just like if you're an athlete, right? So if you're a pitcher out there and you're gonna have your highs and your lows, and if you're kind of somebody hits a home run off you, you're still on the mound, you still got to keep going at it. So similarly, just like in sales, right? You take your lumps, and maybe you lose a deal or you mess something up, but you just got to keep going forward. So it's not about looking in the rearview mirror; it's about looking forward.
That's great. We have a question from Tony Palmer.
Thanks, Tony. Peter, as an international sales leader, do you see a difference managing sales teams and people from different regions, countries, and cultures?
The answer is yes. Yeah, definitely. Not just internationally, but even in the U.S. As a sales leader across the U.S., when I ran global accounts in the U.S., it's different selling in the South than it is selling in Manhattan or in San Francisco. You have to understand who you're selling to. I mean, we've got folks on our team now that are in Singapore, that are in Mexico City, London, Belgium. We hire people that are in country because they understand the culture. They understand how to run their business. It's different, right? You need to understand the nuances across the globe. I think it's interesting. It makes the job fun, but the answer is yes.
Peter, in a lot of international markets, you also sales and marketing have to work really closely, really collaboratively together. Randy, we've got a question from Tucker.
Yes. And Jay Stevenson wrote in Omega, so I'm not sure the relevance there, but maybe you can clarify, but it's probably part of some other question we had. But anyway, Tucker says, how have sales and marketing at HPE become more aligned during the pandemic, or maybe not? And will marketing skills be important for sales professionals to have post-pandemic?
I think the company overall has done a very good job with the high-level messaging from a marketing perspective. So the look and feel across the globe. Take our GreenLake offering, for example. In the everything as a service offerings, they're consistent across the world, right? I think they've done a really good job creating marketing views that are viewed across the world similarly. They're very careful about what they use, because what one thing may mean something different in Japan than it does in London, right? So you'll do we'll do a worldwide view, but then logical view, local view. They've done a good job there. From a marketing perspective, I think what they also have done is you have the worldwide marketing, and then we've got local marketing, field marketing, and they've done a good job tying that back to have a consistent message.
Randy, you and I talked about this. Without trade shows, without exhibits, without demo days, in some ways, I feel like that CMO's job has gotten even that much more difficult. What are you seeing in terms of sales and marketing alignment? The ones that are doing well, what are they doing differently during this pandemic?
Yeah, so I think it's a topic I'm passionate about, but alignment for sales and marketing is absolutely vital. And I still think there's a lot of companies where marketing's off on their own. They've got their own kind of funky ROI metrics. A lot of times sales, and I'm obviously biased, sales is upset because marketing is kind of spending, not getting the right return or not measuring it appropriately. So I think the best practice for sure is either where they're aligned. Marketing people aren't going to like this, but I'd say also if they're not aligned, then having marketing working for sales. So you've got kind of one OpEx envelope. So kind of what your spend is, and then you try and take a look, kind of what are the best areas to get the right return? Should I be hiring a rep? Should I hire an SE? Is there a lead gen program? Is there some other, online trade show that we should do? Is there some schmooze thing? But just making sure that they're really, they're kind of two different functions, but they're really just so codependent on each other.
As Ashley's asking, does it hurt a sales career if I go spend some time in marketing or vice versa?
I don't think so. No, I think one of the things we could be doing a better job is cross-pollinating people. So I think it's a good idea to work in different groups.
Randy, how about you?
Yeah, I'd say as long as the majority of your time is more sales, so it's definitely good to go do tours of duty in different areas, could be even operations or finance or solutions or customer success. But at the same time, I would always say companies where I was at, and I'd mentioned Kelly before, my kind of mentee in London, but we're also yesterday we're saying, hey, you're not carrying a bag in sales, but you're in marketing, and kind of be an account sponsor, go on sales calls, right? So how many times is marketing coming up with these go-to-market plans and ideas, suggestions, and all that, and you say, okay, hey, when's the last time you're on a sales call? So
we've had examples where finance would be telling us to do something, and we take them and we put them in front of a customer, and then they change their mind.
We've got a great question from Michael Cordo.
Michael Cordo, what advice do you have for a new rep at a startup after 2 relatively long tenures at large publicly traded companies, looking to make a big impact right away?
I would say, Michael, sell a lot. Right, that's what you want to do. You want to sell a lot. But you've had some great experience, right, in big companies. When you get into the smaller company, you need to be aggressive, and you got to be willing to do new things, right? I think there's always a view, if you're coming from a big company, you're a big company guy, right? You're not willing to do the down and dirty things you need to do, which means you're willing to do anything to get the job done.
Randy?
Absolutely. Yeah, so definitely sell more. But if you think about the activities and behaviors that go into that, and then having others see, so leveraging, if you're depending, assuming you're calling on some large accounts, but leveraging executives so they can also see kind of what you do and how you do it. So to some Ashley's questions before, in terms of, so you can be positioned as a leader, so when management positions come up, that you're kind of thinking ahead and kind of trying to skate to where the puck's going, but ultimately posting good numbers and having great behaviors for sure.
So for our audience, if you've joined us late, you've been listening to, my name is David Nour. Randy Seidl is the founder of the Sales Community. We host a weekly tech sales insight podcast series with executives like Peter Quirk, who is VP and General Manager of top accounts at HPE. Randy, for those that may not know as much about the Sales Community, why don't you bring us home with a high-level overview of what was your COVID moment and what is the Sales Community about?
Sure. I'll give them the time. I'll focus. The COVID moment was Sales Community. And I guess the value prop is, if you want to learn more and sell more and make more, Sales Community is a great place for you to join and become a member. If you're not interested in learning more or selling more or making more, then stay away. We also have a 30 limited time 30-day free trial, so it's a no-brainer to try it. We've got lots of fantastic content. You can go in and say remote selling. You could put in LinkedIn. There's a search where you can kind of come up interviewing. There's all kinds of topics and best practices that we have in there, and a lot of great exchange and commentary. This week we had one talking about the kind of marketing and sales career path as well. So. We've kind of really developed it into be the kind of one-stop shop really for technology, enterprise, B2B sales, not focused on consumer, not focused on, some of the other areas outside of sales, just really pure sales.
So on behalf of Randy, Peter, thank you for being our guest. And for our audience, every Wednesday, we publish a new podcast episode. Again, it's the Sales Community Tech Sales Insights. Hope you'll subscribe wherever you consume podcasts. We also try to host a guest each week on these live streams. So hope you'll come back and continue to join us. Peter, good to see you, my friend. Randy, I'll see you soon.
Yeah, Nour, thanks, Peter. Thanks, everybody. It's been online. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good day. All right, bye-bye.